afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session of LitFestx. We're joined by Hindol Sengupta, who's an author of six books so far. He's a long tenured journalist, currently also with Fortune magazine India. His last book, Recasting India, became the only book from India ever to be nominated for the Hayek Prize, which is given by the Manhattan Institute in memory of the late Nobel Prize winning economist F.A. Hayek. He is editor at large for Fortune India, as I said. Being Hindu, the book we are discussing today, is his latest book. And as he says, it explores a personal journey through one of the world's oldest faiths at a time of churn, turbulence, and anxiety. And it argues that Hinduism is best placed among religions to embrace the psyche bending changes due to the technological advances of the 21st century. Hindol, welcome to LitFestx.
Thanks, Kumar. It's a delight being here. Thank you.
Hindol, clearly it's an exciting time to be writing a book titled Being Hindu. And, our session today is just taking it ahead a little, saying being Hindu in Bharat. Um, I'm sure when you were writing the book, did you think that we will be discussing it at a time when there is growing intolerance, where there is a lot of issues around communism again in India, and clearly, certain forces are trying to marginalize, some of the other, sort of discourse around other faiths, around practices, etc.
Yeah, so obviously it's a political time in which the book is being released, and I'm cognizant of that. I understand that this is a political time when the book is being released, and there's a lot of conversation about it. Look, as a journalist, I don't trust all headlines that I read, right? I mean, I think that's one of the fundamental things of being a journalist. I think headlines, I mean, I'll give you an example. A scientist recently showed me some numbers. Between 2011 and 2013, there were roughly one communal incident of some sort every 1 hour in India. Somewhere in India, there was something happening, right? And massive, I mean, the massive numbers, some would be large skirmishes, some would be small incidents of violence and whatever. But during that time, did we see even one award returned? No, I'm not, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not in any way denigrating the fact that so many people feel so powerfully that they should give back their awards. I really respect it. I respect their courage. I respect, what they're trying to do. But I sometimes feel that, to take Arun Shauri's immortal words, hyperbole so nihal, there's a lot of hyperbole about lots of things in India. And as a journalist, I don't get carried away. Look, I mean, here's the interesting thing. I understand that we ought to have a conversation about freedom of expression in India. But the funny thing is, the more we hear that there is less freedom of expression in India, the more there is screaming and shouting. It's almost like the more we express ourselves, the more we say there is less freedom of expression in India. Having said that, of course, there are issues. We are a dynamic country. We are an evolving country. We are having a very critical conversation about our identity at this point in time, right? And all of these things means that there will be friction. And there have been some horrid incidents of violence, including one that you referred to, the Dadri incident, which I absolutely abhor, and I think it's absolutely disgusting. But 1 month after, and the one thing that nobody's talking about, which angers me as a writer, 1 month after that ghastly murder took place, no one, not a single person, none of us, none of the other people who are debating this, is talking about the fact that there is no charge sheet yet, till today, against any of the accused. Now, I want to ask the people in charge in Dadri, in that state, the police in charge, as a writer, where is the charge sheet? Because it's not just writing that provides justice. Justice has to be provided by law too. And when a ghastly crime happens, the only way to get closure and justice is if punishment is delivered. And I don't want us to deviate our minds from delivering that punishment and getting into scoring political points against each other. Somebody's life has been lost. Punishment needs to be delivered, an exemplary punishment. Until we see that, I as an author don't think only my words or somebody else's words brings closure. And that's why I think it's really important to discuss what it means to be a Hindu today, and discuss not just in an academic way, but discuss what it means to people like me, an ordinary Hindu. What does it mean to me? And I really believe the greatest tenet of Hinduism is that it's plural, it's accommodative. It leaves it to you. It leaves it to the person to determine. And that pluralism is the greatest strength of Hinduism, right? And I wrote the book to emphasize, because I don't think it can be emphasized enough, how important this pluralism is.
Very interestingly, you mentioned pluralism, and clearly even within that pluralism, we see so many shades of what it means to be an Hindu, so many shades of Hinduism. Partly also, of course, because of the rich cultural diversity that India has, and partly
Yes.
because of modern influences onto the faith and the way people practice it. What are some of those elements that you are bringing about in your new book?
So I'm talking about a whole bunch of things. For instance, this idea about vegetarianism, which has been heavy on people's minds, right? Is being Hindu necessarily mean being a vegetarian? Now, my family for 4 generations has been part of the Ramakrishna mission, the order that Swami Vivekananda himself started, right? Now, the Ramakrishna mission, because they were started by Bengalis, are not vegetarians, right? And yet, for instance, in Bengal, they eat non-vegetarian, they eat fish, for instance. But in South India, the mission has never touched anything non-vegetarian. They are purely vegetarian. But this is coexistent even within the Ramakrishna mission for a millennia, and there's never been a problem. So I don't understand why it should be a problem where even within the Ramakrishna mission, vegetarianism and non-vegetarianism has happily, coexisted for the last more than 100 years. So Swami Vivekananda himself spoke about the fact and how vegetarianism evolved in Hinduism. That at one point there was, a lot of non-vegetarianism, and but then, with the coming of the Buddha, the understanding that cattle is really important as we got into farming, right? These are historical antecedents of this conversation, right? As cattle became more and more important, it was not logical to butcher cattle because you needed cattle for a whole bunch of other things, including farming, right? Those are some of the places from where the vegetarianism conversation comes from, right? But those are very practical conversations, and I don't think they should be polemical conversations, if you know what I mean. These are practical conversations. They're well cited in our history. I don't think we need to make them polemical conversations. And frankly, who eats what? Look, at the end of the day, I don't need to rub into your face what I'm eating. As long as I don't do that, it doesn't matter what I eat or what you eat for that matter. None of us should have the right to force anything upon anybody else. But as long as we are respectful to each other's beliefs and customs, I think we shouldn't have a problem. But these kind of conversations has to be emphasized again and again in India, because very quickly hardline positions could be taken on both sides. And I don't think most people, most ordinary people like you and me have a hardline position, but our voices are never heard. And I think it's really important to emphasize that there is a middle path voice, which all of us represent.
Very interestingly, if you see, not just in India, but even abroad, till a few years ago, I'm sure if you met somebody from the US or UK and if somebody asked you, are you a Hindu, or, what caste or religion are you from? And you said, yes, you are a Hindu, then people would say, so, do you eat meat? And like you mentioned, not just in India, but abroad as well, people had synonymized being Hindu with being vegetarian and with certain practices. Is it then, true that, a lot of this knowledge about the fact that even different Hindus are practicing their Hinduism with respect to being vegetarian or not, or eating fish, like you said, in Bengal or maybe down south, not eating, meat. Is that fact well known in the sort of popular media, in popular discourse? When you were writing the book, did you have to, do some of this digging around?
Well, I think, let me tell you, the first thing that I realized when I was writing the book, what I realized was, while all of us know so much about the world, we are taught nothing about our cultural heritage in our school. I went to one of the most swish and expensive schools in Calcutta. I know everything about, Christianity, because I went to the chapel service for 14 years of my life. Even if you wake up from my sleep, I can tell you the Lord's Prayer by heart. But do I know the Gayatri Mantra? No, I don't. The point is, and I was once having this conversation about Manjul Bhargav, who won the Fields Medal in mathematics last year, the highest award in the world for mathematics. And he solved a critical theorem using the work of Brahmagupta, the 7th century great Indian mathematician. But was I taught about Aryabhatta, Brahmagupta, the philosophies of the Vedas, the Puranas when I was in school? No. So I have no understanding of my heritage and culture. None at all. Was I taught about Shushruta, one of the greatest ancient, medical practitioners and surgeons ever? No, I wasn't. So there is a fundamental problem about the way we approach education in our country, where we are taught about all sorts of things, but not about our own cultural heritage. Look, I grew up reading only Enid Blyton, and I love Enid Blyton. But did I have any understanding about the stories from my cultural heritage? The stories from the tales of the Buddha, from the Jataka tales, from the Puranas? No. How much did any of us learn about those things? We didn't, especially if you had what we in India would call a convent education in the English language. We never learned any of this. And we formed the elite of this country. So essentially, we have an elite in this country which is completely torn away and dissociated from our own cultural heritage. We know nothing. See, the reason we are having such an illiterate conversation today about Hinduism is because we know nothing ourselves. The people who even think of themselves as progressive or elite or whatever, even people like you and I, who are educated people, actually know very little about Hinduism and our Hindu heritage and culture. So essentially, the history that we have learned pretty much is from 15th century onwards. We don't know anything that happened before that. Nothing. I mean, we have no knowledge. Some of the most sublime philosophies and theology were created in India. Do we know anything about that? No. So this dissociation, the great art critic Ananda Kumaraswamy once famously wrote about this, that, 2 or 3 generations of such cutting away from your own culture essentially turns a civilization completely crazy. Because why are we having such a conversation about identity in our country today? Because we don't know what our identity is. That's why I wrote the book. So I'm Hindu or you're Hindu. But why are you Hindu? Because your parents were Hindu? Because their parents were Hindu? No. What does it mean to you? You don't have an answer, as in not you per se, but I don't have an answer, right? Most of us don't have an answer. We are just Hindu notionally, nominally, because our parents were Hindus, and we go to. Does Hinduism really mean only going to the temple on Wednesday and fasting on Tuesday? No, I don't think so. We have no philosophical grounding at all. That's why we are caught in, whether it's cattle or not, or whether it's, washing your hand or not. And Vivekananda famously wrote about this. I mean, he said that, if this goes on, I mean, if this kitchen-oriented, what he called kitchen-oriented conversation about faith and, religion goes on, we will go crazy in a few years. And that's exactly what has happened to us.
Very interesting point there, Hindol. Clearly, I couldn't agree more. The lack of a grounded understanding of who we are and why we are that way with respect to following religion is clearly missing from a lot of our textbooks and our curricula. So when you wrote the book, part of it, as you had mentioned in the synopsis, was also your own personal journey in trying to make sense of sort of India and life as a Hindu. And tell us a little bit of those layers which have gone into the book.
So I'll give you an example. The book starts with this image of me sort of sitting in chapel service in school, and attending chapel service, where for 14 years I'm being told that, funnily enough, idol worship is terrible, that it's a great sin to worship idols. And I'm about 14 or 15 when it occurs to me, because I'm not thinking about this. As a child, you don't think. You go to chapel service, you're bored sometimes, you sing a hymn, sometimes you're coming out, right? But I'm about 14 or 15, and this is right before Durga Puja in Calcutta, right? Which is this gargantuan celebration of idol worship, essentially, right? Okay. So 2 or 3 days before Durga Puja holidays, I'm sitting in chapel service in my school, and some pastor is giving us this long, furious lecture saying, idol worship is terrible, and you're a sinner if you practice this, and blah, blah, blah. And suddenly it occurs to me as a 15-year-old boy that this is hilarious. We're just going into Durga Puja break. We will all have this gigantic idol worship celebration with this whole city. And here I am 2 days before that, sitting in the same city in school, hearing how it's a great sin. The whole thing was so ironical and so funny and so hilarious that it stayed with me. And that's where I begin questioning that what a ridiculous thing to even hear as a school child, right? It makes no sense to my own cultural moorings. It's a bit like, I mean, I compare it to how, we used to read Enid Blyton's and dream about ginger ale and tuck boxes. There was no ginger ale or tuck boxes in Calcutta. We had no idea what was there. But those were our cultural references because we had been torn away from our own cultural references, right? I mean, so I just think these things that generations of Indians have gone through, it's hilarious. That's why, you see, we don't have a normal conversation about our own culture and religion. I would like to see a normal conversation saying, okay, I've been grounded in understanding my own culture, then I'm criticizing it. I'm saying this ritual is, in my book, for instance, I give a detailed explanation. I'm in Varanasi, right? I spent time in Varanasi during writing the book. And I see how dirty and filthy the place is. And I'm asking questions in the book that as a practicing Hindu, if I'm always so concerned about the universe and this, that, and the other, how is it that most of my temples are so dirty? How is it that my religious towns are so dirty? How is it that Ganga and Yamuna are some of the most polluted and foul in the world? What does it say about us? So I'm questioning it. But in order to question, I must know in something. The problem is that we are having an illiterate conversation. On one side are illiterates who know only one thing about their faith, which is Hinduism equals what you eat. On the other side is another bunch of illiterates who know nothing, who only know, what they've read, which has been written by Westerners, and so they have no connection with their faith. So two illiterate sides are conversing with each other about some of the most sublime traditions in the world, which is, if it wasn't so sad, it would be utterly hilarious. And that's why I wrote the book. Because I was so amused and irritated that I was like, I have to write a book. And I don't claim in the book that I'm this great theologist or historian at all. I say I'm a journalist. I'm a practicing journalist. So that's my approach to the book. And I'm questioning all sides.
You've used this term of being a internet Hindu.
Yeah.
Book. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So, the internet Hindu phrase was, as you know, invented and used in a very different sort of way to describe trolls. And I think that's a stupid term, but I reinvented that term in the book. I said, actually, the internet Hindu is a very different thing. Because if you really look at science, okay, if you look at quantum physics, famously at CERN, the great European Institute of Quantum Physics and Atomic Physics, do you know that there is this massive Nataraja kept there, the dancing Shiva? Because the scientists who studied quantum physics, many of them Nobel laureates, realized that when they read the concepts of the Vedas and the concepts of Shiva worship, that the Tandav, the Nataraja and the Tandav of Shiva is closest to articulating what quantum physics teaches, which is that all energy, flows into one another or flows into each other and can never be destroyed. It's an endless cycle of destruction and creation, regeneration, again and again and again and again. And the Nataraja, the Shiva's, Tandav, is about that. Shiva creates and destroys constantly. So it was very close to the idea of what quantum physics was talking about. But do we talk about, you tell me, do we talk about this in our sort of day-to-day conversation? No. So I talk about the fact that actually in the internet age, when we realize that everything that we know about our world is changing, Hinduism actually is best placed to help you embrace this new world that is coming. Do you know this idea of singularity, that, everything finally will come into one singular concept, right? Is the concept of the Brahman. Swami Vivekananda famously talks about singularity too. That modern science will finally understand that actually it's all in, the universe can be defined by one single idea, which is the Brahman, which is the, the eternal idea of energy, soul, cosmos, whatever you want to call it, right? All of these concepts are already there, it exists, but we have never spoken about it. Nobody knows anything about it. So I don't think the internet Hindu is a bad term at all. I think actually it should be reinvented because the concepts of Hinduism are best placed to prepare us for the world that we are coming into. A highly technologically advanced world where all the things that we once knew about touch, smell, hearing, our bodily senses, they're all being bent So if we are moving into an intelligent world, a smart world where technology and human beings are going to fuse, that singularity can best be described by Hinduism.
You mentioned the digital world and the tech world. I mean, clearly, we are living in times where one can almost believe that technology and apps and startups will solve all our problems.
Yeah,
We'll have an app for everything.
yeah,
Uh, I think in the book somewhere you've spoken about this whole startup phenomena. So,
yeah.
what in respect to Hinduism are you talking about? In terms of startups.
Look, in the book, I talk about this, that why is being Hindu at this point in time in history critical, right? Why is understanding Hinduism critical? Because you see, we are going through a time of tremendous change. Everything we know about our lives or our world is changing, right? Now, at that time, when we face ecological disaster in some senses, we face energy crisis, we face war and trials and tribulation. Think about this. Depression or mental illness is one of the fastest growing killers in the world. More people are committing suicide than ever before. More people are lonely than ever before. I mean, loneliness is an epidemic in our world today, right? Now, what I try to explain is the West will give us some answers. So the West will give us the sort of Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg kind of answers. So they will say, okay, you have an energy crisis, Elon Musk will build the most fantastic battery in the world, which will mean that you don't have to use fossil fuels anymore, and so on and so forth. Google will give us a driverless car, right? Which will never have an accident, and so on and so forth, right? But those are all the material solutions. Apart from the material solutions, we also have a crisis of our mind, which is why more people are lonely than ever before, more families are broken than ever before, more people go through extreme depression than ever before and are killing themselves. Those solutions the West cannot give us. So I talk about something I call the startups for the soul, that the East will have to bring about the startups for the soul to find answers that will make us happy inside. The West will give us all the answers to make us happy outside, but our insides will still remain unhappy and extremely distraught. Where are the answers for that? Look, in our education system, Kumar, if you think about it, we are taught about all sorts of things, right? Mathematics and geography and algebra and this, that, and the other. What are we not taught about? We are not taught about how to deal with failure. We are not taught about how to deal with it when a parent dies. We are not taught about how to think about death. We are not taught how to deal with love and what happens when you go through an extreme heartbreak. What happens when you're fired from your job? What happens when you see cruelty around you, right? All these intrinsic human emotions that actually make or break our lives, we are not taught how to deal with at all. So we don't know how to deal with any of these things at all. We have no understanding on how to deal with these things. And those are the critical answers that the East will have to give. And those are psychological answers, they are theological answers, they are philosophical answers. Those are the startups that the East will have to give the world, because the West doesn't have it in them to give these answers.
Hindol, certainly, this startup idea which you mentioned sounds very interesting. And if you are really interested in taking it ahead, then I'm all up for creating the next app or the next site or whatever it is around it, because
Well, that's
clearly
amazing.
history has shown that.
Actually had a private conversation and figured out a startup idea.
Certainly, certainly. No, but on a serious note, clearly, history has shown that a lot of the discourse and literature around, if we can call it the mystique of how to live life,
Yeah,
spiritualism, everything has
yeah,
come from the East, right? And the fun part is today technology allows you to delve deeper into its understanding, both in terms of conducting research, digging into the history behind it, and presenting those facts in a narrative which the common man can understand, in a narrative which the West can understand better using digital technology. At this point in time, I think we'll take in a couple of questions which are coming on the Twitter feed.
sure.
So you'll see the question on the screen, and then you can respond to it.
Sure.
So the first question, I think it's Shivangi, and she says, "What aspects of religion have you tried to explore?"
Well, I've really tried to explore only one aspect of Hinduism, not all religion. I've tried to understand what are the core principles of Hinduism. And the answers that I've come to look, famously, Hinduism only has three questions that need to be answered. So Hinduism believes that there are only three questions that need to be answered. Who am I? What do I want? And what is my purpose? And it said you spend most of your lifetime on question number one, who am I? Right? And I really believe that the tenets of Hinduism that I have explored essentially talks about a fundamentally individualistic, plural faith, which is best placed to take on the challenges of the 21st century.
Okay. The next question is, I think it's linked to the first one, but it says, "What makes the religion Hindu so tempting and encouraging to be taken as the subject of the book?"
Because most Hindus know very little about their faith. So that's my answer. We know, most of us know so little about our faith that we have to learn much more, even in order to criticize it. We can't even criticize it without knowing something. You have to know something to criticize it. We don't even know enough to criticize.
Very interestingly, when you mentioned that we don't know enough to even criticize it, and clearly there's so much of noise in the system currently, especially with all the headlines and some of these incidents that have happened in the recent past. One almost feels that there is this ground up debate on, is one religion really the right religion, and which is that religion? What is the right way to practice it? Can we do it peacefully? So on and so forth. And do you think this book is, in many ways, then going to answer some of those questions at the core?
It'll try to. I mean, fundamentally, the book only goes back to some knowledge that we already have for 3,000 years, right? And I mean, to sum it up in an answer in a format and forum like this is to go back to the fundamental tenets of Vedic knowledge, which is Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vedanti, right? The truth is one. The sages explain it differently, right? So the truth is one. Remember, those are the fundamental tenets of Hinduism. Ekam Sat, the truth is one. And then you can approach it in various ways. And then the other famous line, Tattvamasi, you are that, right? So Hinduism is the only faith that says God is not something outside you. God is you. I mean, Vivekananda famously saying, what is Buddha and Christ in the waves of knowledge that is you, right? Buddha and Christ are just manifestations in the eternal power and knowledge that you have inside you, right? So what can be more engrossing and enriching than an idea that there is no God per se outside you? God is you. Your highest manifestation is God. And I think for our individualistic times, what can be a greater mantra than that? And therefore, it was very relevant for me to explore it.
Very, very interesting conversation with you, Hindol. And we are at the end of our session at LitFestx. Fantastic having you with us. And I'm sure, our viewers who are watching live and many more who will see the recording on YouTube will be excited to get their hands on this book, irrespective of what religion they come from, because clearly you've taken a lot of effort in trying to answer some of the questions which bothers a lot of us in our day-to-day lives. So congratulations on the book, and wish it all the success.
Thank you. And one day we'll do that startup for the soul.
Certainly. Take care.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.